So here is the NSO field guide to penalty lineup tracking, trackside training series by me, Hannah Ballistic. So disclaimer, this presentation is not endorsed by any organization. To remain consistent with WFDA materials, some text and examples have been quoted directly from official WFDA documents. However, WFDA and any other organizations are not responsible for content or accuracy of this presentation. All of the information is current as of today's date, and any opinions expressed are solely my own. This session is being recorded. So here again are our NSO positions. Right now, we are going to be focusing on these two NSOs in the infield, our penalty lineup tracking. So penalty tracking duties. So like I said earlier, this penalty lineup tracking is kind of two positions merged together. So I'm going to first show you how it is separately. And then basically it will just be like, okay, well, these are two different positions. You're just going to merge them together at the end. So our penalty tracking duties, you're going to track what penalties are issued, track the number of penalties for each skater, and track skaters that have fouled out or expelled. Your lineup tracking duties, you're going to record skaters fielded in each jam by each team. You're going to track when skaters enter and exit the penalty box. And you're going to track when injured skaters have to sit out for 3 jams. So if a skater is injured, they are not able to play for another 3 jams if the injury is not that severe. So each penalty lineup tracker is going to be tracking for one team. So basically you only have to focus on one team's skaters. You don't really have to worry about the other one. So here is a view of the paperwork filled out at the end of period 1. This is just an overview of what it's going to look like, you know, if you're doing this on paper at the end of when you're completed. So before the game starts, you're going to introduce yourself to the NSOs working the inside track and in the penalty box. So I mentioned some NSOs have partners. The penalty lineup trackers are partners with the penalty box. Penalty box timers are going to be timing for one team, so you're going to want to buddy up with them. You're going to ensure you have all of your tools, your pencils, paperwork, clipboard. If you're doing EPLT, which is on a tablet, make sure you have your tablet, a stylus if you prefer, not to use your finger. You're going to determine which team you will be tracking and which penalty timer has the same team as you. You're going to verify skater numbers have not been adjusted with the NSO. So sometimes skaters are rostered for the game ahead of time, so I fill out the paperwork ahead of time. But then when we get into the game and I check who's here, they'll be like, oh, sorry, this skater was sick or is unable to make it, so we have to take them off. And maybe we have a substitution, so I have to put their number back in. So it's good to just check and make sure that there's no skater numbers have been either entered wrong, and we have to fix them before the game starts. So during the gameplay, what you're going to look out for are, from referees, you're going to listen for multiple penalties. From your PLT to the penalty box, you're going to look for total number of penalties. From your jam timer, you're going to listen for that 5 seconds and jam start. So during lineups at 25, so lineups are 30 seconds. At 25 seconds, the jam timer will yell 5 seconds. And then at that 30 seconds, they'll start the jam. From a ref or a jam timer, you're going to listen for the jam ending, that for the 3 sets of 4 tweets. And then from a ref or visually from another NSO, you're going to look for a star pass. Usually they'll do like this kind of situation, movement. Also stoppages, you're going to listen for or look out for a team timeout, official review. This is the hand signal for multiple penalties. Usually they'll go like this for how many penalties. So let's get into the paperwork. So this might be a little overwhelming, so I'm going to go in each column and each scenario individually. So when you get the paperwork, you're going to fill out your form header. You're going to fill out your name, your team that you're tracking, the team color or cue, depending on if we're following the new rule set. You're going to write down the date, and if the roster has not been filled out and it's just like blank paperwork, you're going to fill in the roster. So with all paperwork, the margins are for your notes. They're not officially tracked, but if something weird happens, write a little note to me or to your head NSO. It is very helpful. In Derby, it's not if something weird happens, it's when. So when something happens, just write a little note, put a little arrow to the bottom wherever you have room to write. So here is a close-up of the penalty lineup tracker sheet. So on the blue side, we have our jam number. We have a no pivot column. We have a spot to put your jammer number box. So this is where you would mark the penalty box trips for that jammer. And then we have our pivot where you would put your pivot number. We have our blockers, your 3 blockers. You're going to have your roster list that you can reference, your penalties, where you would put your penalties, and then your foul out and expulsion column. So let's go into lineup tracking. Let's focus on that right now. So lineup, in the jam number column, you're going to write the jam number at the beginning of each jam, starting at 1 for each period. So when period 2 happens, you're going to reset to start at 1. Overtime jams, so if the score is tied at the end of the second period, the overtime jams will continue the number of the second period. So if the last jam in regulation time was 20, the overtime jam is going to be 21. Do not pre-fill jam numbers, because in the case of a star pass, you're going to use the next line for that information. And you don't know if there's going to be a star pass in a jam before the jam actually happens. So don't pre-fill. So what are we doing when we have star passes? You're going to move down to the next line and write an SP in that jam number column. You're going to start tracking the rest of the jam in that new SP line. And on that SP line, you're going to write the new jammer in the jammer field and the former jammer in the pivot field. So the pivot passed the star to the jammer passed the star to the pivot. That pivot is now the new jammer and goes in the jammer field. The former jammer is now no longer the jammer, so they get written in the pivot field. And you're going to copy the rest of the blockers that stay the same from the current jam number line. So what happens if the other team has a star pass? So you're going to move down to the next line and continue by writing SP in that jam number column. You're going to continue tracking the rest of the jam in your original jam numbers row. Do not mark anything in the SP row. You leave it blank. If at the end of your jam, your team does not also have a star pass, you add a little asterisk star to the SP to make it SP asterisk. And so if it does have for both teams, you're still keeping one SP star pass tracking row per jam. So if the team you are tracking also has a star pass for that jam, you're going to move down to the SP row and continue tracking there. You don't add an asterisk to the SP if both teams have a star pass. The asterisk is only if the other team has it and you do not. So this is kind of confusing. Why do we do it this way? So the asterisk shows that the lineup tracker didn't forget the information and saw that they were tracking it. It is required for the stats book to be calculated correctly. The stats book is this massive Excel file that has a lot of different calculations. So both paperwork of the lineup trackers have to equal, like the lines have to match up. If it doesn't match up, it's going to be a lot of detective work for your head NSO. So both teams are going to use the same number of rows. And so if both teams had a star pass in the same jam, you only mark SP. And that tells me when I'm reviewing the paperwork after the game, what happened in that jam. Let's go into the next column, which is no pivot and jammer number. You're going to write the roster number of the jammer for that jam. During the star pass for your team, you're going to write the roster for your new jammer / former pivot on the next line down. You're going to put an X in the no pivot box for the new SP row. So then we go over to pivots and blockers. You're going to write the roster number of each skater in the corresponding position box. If the team does not field a pivot, the one with the striped helmet cover, then you will mark an X in the no pivot and use that pivot box number as another blocker. If the team is skating short, if they have less than the regular number of skaters in a jam, you're going to write NA in the box for the missing skater. So if a team had all the skaters needed in a jam, but you didn't miss it, or things happen, you didn't get a chance to record the skater number, just write a question mark in the box for the skater that you missed. Try to catch it as if you can. This is kind of a last resort. If you're just like, I just couldn't see it, was like a 10-second jam. I don't know. Now, so to the right of every skater number, there is 3 boxes shaded in dark blue, and those are for penalty box trips. So when a skater enters or was in and exited the penalty box. It also is where you can track injured skaters for a jam that was called off for that skater's injury. So if a skater hit their head really hard, the officials will call the jam dead, and that will get the paramedics over, evaluate the skater, and then if that skater is fit enough to return to the game, they will have to sit out the following 3 jams. So this is what it looks like for a jam called off for an injury. You're going to mark a 3 for injury to show that the skater has to sit out for the next 3 jams. So penalty was called on a skater, and they go over to the penalty box. You're going to write a little dash, a horizontal line. This shows that the skater sat down in the penalty box during the jam, so as the jam was active. You use this only if the skater sits in the penalty box and begins serving their time during the jam. Do not use if a skater is on the way to the box and the jam ends before they are seated. If a skater is in queue from a full box, so if there's no seat available and they have to return to the track, you start tracking when the skater is actually in the box. For penalty box timing and lineups, you're really noting when butt hits chair. That's when you really care about tracking when they are in the box. So if they sat down between jams or they're serving across multiple jams, you're gonna write an S. And I kind of phrase it as S is still in the box or started in the box. So you're gonna use if the skater started the current jam sitting in the box. And you also use this in the star pass line if a skater is in the penalty box when the team passes the star, or if there's a substitution for continuing to serve another skater's penalty, such as for an injury, a foul out, or an expulsion. So if any of those happen, the skater will be removed from the penalty box if the jam ends with them still in the box. And then you would write a little S for the new sub. So a vertical line means that the penalty was complete. So you already have a horizontal line if they sat in that jam. If they completed it in that jam, you're going to make it a plus. You're going to make a little vertical line. So adding the vertical line to the horizontal notation makes it a little plus mark. And you're going to use this for skaters who foul out or expelled and they completed their penalty service in the same jam. So with the S, the vertical line is going to make a $sign. So this will show that the skater was in the penalty box at the start of the jam and completed serving during the jam that they already started in the box. So you take that S, start in a box or still in a box, however you want to phrase it. When they finish, vertical line, $sign. I like how that rhymed. So box trips with star passes. I mentioned this briefly before, but let's go into it a bit more. So during a star pass, you're going to write all of the penalty box entrances and exits for the row on the row for the current jammer. If a skater is already in the penalty box when the star pass occurs, you're going to mark an S on the SP row to show the continuing of penalty service. You're going to mark any additional penalty box entrance and exits using normal marks on the SP line. So basically, if it happened, if anything happened before the star pass, it's going to be on the regular row of the jam number row. If it's after the star pass, it's basically that kind of gets split, and you're going to put it in the star pass row. So if there's if the other team has a star pass and your team does not, you're going to leave the star pass star row blank. Don't fill anything out. So let's get into some scenarios, and I think this will really help click, and it will have some examples of paperwork. So here we have scenario 1. We have blocker. Oh, can you see my? Yeah, there we go. So you can see my little pointer. We have blocker 8-7 in jam 2. And they went to the penalty box and completed their service in the same jam. So we have a plus. When they sat, you did a horizontal, and when they completed, a plus. Here we have also in jam 2, we have blocker 8-7. They completed their service during jam 3. So they sat in jam 2, and they started jam 3 in the box. So a little S, and then they completed in that jam 3, so $sign. So again, we have 8-7 in jam 2. They completed their service for it during jam 2, so we have a little plus sign. And then they went back into play and came back to the box for a second penalty, and they sat in jam 2 and then completed their service for jam 3. So they had 2 penalties across these 2 jams. So here we have 8-7 sat for jam 2, and then their team had a star pass. Then they completed serving during jam 2. So this, instead of having a plus here, they finished their service after the star pass happened for their team. Again, you'd have the no pivot and the no pivot line. Your pivot became your jammer became your pivot, and your blocker 8-7 finished their service after the star pass. So again, blocker 8-7 sat in jam 2. The opposing team had a star pass, and then they completed service during jam 3. That's an error. So basically, they sat in jam 2. There was a star pass for the other team. The jam ended, and they started in the box in jam 3 and completed in jam 3. So again, they sat in jam 2. Their team had a star pass, and they completed serving during jam 3. So the star pass, they were still in the jam. The jam ended after the star pass, but they didn't complete their service. So they started jam 3 in the box and completed in the box. So there are a lot of scenarios. Just bear with me. They cover a lot. So so blocker 8-7 had a penalty in jam 2, but the jam ended. But they sat in between periods, or in between jams. So they sat after jam 2 ended, but before jam 3 started. So they started in the box, and they completed their service during jam 3. So this is where you would have started in box and not anything in the previous jam. So if they sat after jam 1 ended, but before jam 2 started, and then there were a bunch of short jams, so they continued serving through jam 3 and finished serving in jam 4. So you would have, they started between jam 1 and jam 2. Jam 3 was a really short one, so they didn't, they didn't finish, and then they started jam 4 and completed in jam 4. So if the team didn't field a pivot, blocker 8-7 is in jam 2 as the 4th blocker. So they just didn't have anyone in a pivot position. So you would write no pivot. And this pivot column becomes the fourth jammer. And they got a penalty in jam 2, and they sat, and then the jam ended. And in jam 3, because now there is a pivot, you have to use the pivot column. The 8-7 skater gets marked under the blocker, and they have an S for started in the box, and they completed during jam 3. So we have blocker 8-7 sat in jam 2, and someone notices, or they notice, that they are actively bleeding from a cut. Their time was not completed in jam 2, and blocker 3-7-5 was subbed in between jams and completed serving in jam 3. So because our blocker had an injury and the jam was called off, they went to the paramedics, and because of the injury, they had to sit out for 3 jams. And then 3-7-5 did not get the penalty was not transferred to 3-7-5, but you still mark because they were in the box. And this is also a great chance where this is one of the weird things that happened. Write a little note about what happened. So if both teams completed a star pass during this jam 2, so this top one is one team and the red box is the other team, you can see that they both have an SP with no pivot and no asterisks. And everything is just copied down from the numbers are copied down from the above row. Okay, let's take a little breather and let's go to penalty tracking. Penalty tracking is a lot less involved. So in the penalty side of this paperwork, you start on the first column of the first row and write the penalty code in the top row and jam number in the bottom row for each skater. So on the paperwork, there is a little area for the penalty codes. I don't expect anyone to remember the penalty codes, immediately, especially for our new people. It will just take some time to understand the hand signals and the penalty codes. And I will link to a resource where you can kind of study that. So also any penalties past this dark line right here, that means that they have fouled out with 7 or more penalties. So after that 7th penalty, the skater has to gear down and leave the game. You're going to write the jam in which the penalty was issued, regardless of when it was served. So opposed to the lineup tracking, where you track when the skater is in the box, the penalty side is when the penalty was issued. So again, this is just a close-up of the penalty code and the jam number. So if a skater is issued a penalty in between jams, you're going to write the jam number of the jam in which the skater was participating. So like if a blocker had a late hit, it was in the previous jam, you're going to write that number. Versus if a blocker had an early hit during lineups for a jam, you would write the upcoming jam. You're going to write any delay of game penalties for the upcoming jam in which the jam is being delayed. So basically what that boils down to is focus on if a penalty happens in between jams, which jam does that affect? So if it was a late penalty in the previous jam, it would happen then. If it was something that is related to the upcoming jam, then it would be that one. That's kind of how you have to frame it. So if we have non-skater expulsions, such as for a bench staff, if there was any deserving penalties there, you would write the penalties associated with that expulsion for a non-skating member of the bench staff. You're going to write the bench staff's member in the space under non-skater expulsions. This is at the bottom of the sheet. And you're going to write the penalties the same way as the rest of the penalty section with the code at the top. So this is for misconduct. and then the jam number in the bottom. So foul outs. So this is an image of the second period because you shade out the the boxes from the first period for the second period sheet. So you're going to write foul outs for the accumulated penalties as FO for foul out in the top row of this foul out expulsion section, and the jam in which you recorded the penalty. So the code for this foul out seventh penalty is P. So you don't write the P here, you write the foul out, and it happened in jam 6. So if alternatively, if an expulsion happens for such as an egregious penalty, you're going to write the appropriate penalty code in the top row and the jam in which the penalty occurred in the bottom row. You're also going to write expulsions in the penalty/jam section for that skater. So basically, you're just copying what happened, the penalty that happened over here to the expulsion foul out section. So during halftime, you're going to meet with penalty box timers and confirm each skater's total penalties. You're going to transfer penalties from period 1 by shading the same number of fields on the period 2 sheet. So each period, so they have to have 7 penalties throughout the entire game to foul out. So penalties from the first period carry over to the second period. You're also going to transfer any skaters who will start period 2 in the penalty box to the period 2 sheet. So when period 2 happens, you're going to go to the new sheet and prepare that. So you're going to add the number of penalties for each skater in that period and write them in the margin. You do not count anything from the foul out expulsion column to the total. Those are just like notes for what occurred for the foul out or expulsion. You're also going to let the head NSO know the penalty total for the whole period, so that they can write it on the paperwork for the game for sanctioning. You also may be switching teams for the second half. Just check with your head NSO if you are switching, and if you are, you'll switch clipboards but keep the same paperwork, team's paperwork together. So if I was doing penalty lineup tracking for team A, and we were switching to I was switching to team B, I would just give my team A paperwork to the other penalty lineup tracker. I personally do not have my my penalty lineup trackers switch sides or switch teams, because you already are familiar with the numbers from the first period, so it makes it easier to work with the second period. So penalties, your total examples. So here are the totals. Sorry. So when you total at the end of each period, you'll add up the penalties for each skater and write them in the total column on the far right. Do not add anything from the foul out expulsion column. At the end of the game, you're going to do the same thing as you did for halftime. You're going to tally up totals for each skater in the margins. You're going to let the head NSO know the penalty total for all skaters in that period. And then you're going to turn in the paperwork and any tools that you borrowed to the designated location to the head NSO or to the head NSO directly. So let's look at what a typical jam would look like for a penalty lineup tracker. So let's say, we're starting the game during or in between jams during the 30-second lineup. You're going to write down the skater numbers as you see them. You may need to fill out skater numbers after the jam is started. If you can't see them clearly, whether there's like hair in the way or the armbands are twisted or whatever happens, just write them as soon as you can see them clearly. Also take note of any skaters in the penalty box. So when a penalty is called, you're going to listen for that long whistle blow, and you're going to look for hand signals and the verbal cue said by the referee. for the type of penalty and who it was issued to. You're going to write down the penalty code and jam number in the penalty field for that skater. You're also going to mark when they sit in the box. Also, so there are a lot of venues are very loud or have poor acoustics, so verbal cues can be hard to hear. You're going to watch for the hand signals. So in this, you can also repeat the hand signals from the skating official to confirm. So in this little red box, we have a penalty lineup tracker doing the X for a cut, and the outside referees will, confirm that that was what the penalty was called for. If you have a penalty wrangler, they can help with to catch these penalties. I usually do that as a head NSO. I will, kind of follow around the track and try to listen out for penalties as they are called. So, again, when a penalty is called, this is a duplicate. So when a penalty happens between jams, you're going to write the jam number for which the penalty, the penalty affected. For a late hit penalty that occurred after the jam ended, the previous jam will be recorded. For a delay of game penalty, the upcoming jam number will be recorded. So a rescinded penalty. If there is an official review, a team thinks that a penalty was called or was called improperly, the skating officials will meet and agree to remove or rescind a penalty after they have an elongate discussion. And if the penalty is rescinded, you will erase that penalty for that skater. Alternatively, if there was a penalty that should have happened and the officials say that that is correct, this was a missed penalty, you will add that penalty. And this happens during official reviews. You may, as penalty lineup trackers, you may be present during official reviews to take note of the outcome, or if you had a clear view of what happened, you can also provide information. During a timeout or a stoppage of play, you're going to meet with your penalty box timer to confirm the penalties for each skater. You're going to confirm that the penalty totals are accurate. Usually you just go down the list and say, this skater had 2, this skater had 3, and so on. Bring up any discrepancies to the attention of the head NSO. After each period, again, meet with the penalty box timer and confirm the penalties for each skater, confirm the totals are accurate, and total up the skater and team period penalties. Relay all totals to the head NSO. So here is EPLT. So the scoreboard software does have the ability to have tablets used, and the duties, use a tablet instead of basically doing the paperwork. And this will basically make the head NSO's job a bit easier because everything is automatically saved to the same file. The duties remain the same. So usually I will, at the beginning of the, before the game starts, I will go over the how to use the penalty lineup tracker tablet with everyone that needs to know how to use it. Here are my references. I use the WIFTA officiating resources and learning courses. Official Emails YouTube, great resource. Dublin Roller Derby also has some great resources on the paperwork. It might be a little bit outdated, but it's still very relevant. And then Queen Catitude made a NSO position guide that I will be sending out to all